This idea that silver is just another industrial metal now is wrong. And that's a good thing, because when there's an incorrect idea out there, sooner or later, reality asserts itself. Reality does matter. And when that idea corrects, the snap to, the coiled spring unleashed can be phenomenal. So I think this is perhaps the most fundamental argument in favor of silver right now.
This is Dunnigan Kaiser, founder of Liberty and Finance. I'm now a licensed gold and silver broker for Miles Franklin. Call me directly for the physical gold and silver that you need at the best price with personalized private service from one of the oldest and best companies in the business. 31 years strong, A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, 0 complaints, licensed and bonded for physical delivery, vault storage, or precious metals IRAs. Excellent prices, privacy, and confidentiality. Pay by check, money order, ACH, bank wire, or Bitcoin. Satisfaction guaranteed. Call me directly at 419-819-9209 or my sons and fellow brokers at 310-562-6400 or 419-490-5295 or email us kaiser@milesfranklin.com.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is Lobo Tiggre from the Independent Speculator. Lobo, thank you so much for joining us today.
Happy to be back with you, and two of my favorite subjects, liberty and finance. So let's go.
Definitely. And that actually kind of brings an interesting point about it, is like, how are those connected? And I think when, we were figuring out the name for the channel, it's like liberty and finance. So that's what precious metals give, right? They're a financial asset, but they also give liberty, where it's like money outside of the system. And a lot of people, the main metal out there, the main thing that, the average man would think about if they think about precious metals is gold. But so many people are so intrigued about silver, and there's so many bullish fundamentals behind silver that it's kind of the forgotten metal in some sense, where so many people are so obsessed with gold. It's like, silver has the positive reasons to own it, just as gold does, but it even has more. So I was wondering if we could kind of start off on that topic. Like, I know you are very bullish on silver. What are some of the bullish fundamentals and reasons that you think that silver will rise in the future?
Sure. Happy to talk about that. But actually, I want to jump back to something you said earlier and framing it, liberty and finance. So let me talk about the liberty for just a moment, because that's actually near and dear to me. I'm a libertarian. I'm of the anarcho-capitalist sort of hardcore end of that spectrum. And it's a curious thing to me how many libertarians, scarcely have 2 quarters to rub together in their pockets. And they defend free enterprise and capitalism, but they don't seem real keen on practicing it. And what I want to tell people or encourage people to do is, don't think poor. I'm not Napoleon Hill, but if you think poor, you're likely to end up that way. And if you tell yourself, there are more important things to me, liberty is more important than finance. I'm a principled person and I'm not going to cooperate with this corrupt world. You can tell yourself that, but finance is the pathway to real freedom in this world. If you're going to wait for governments to go away and leave you alone, you're going to wait a long time. But if you increase your personal net worth, the number of choices available to you, your freedom to do things in this world will increase dramatically. And I have experienced this in my own life. Thanks to Doug Casey, I was one of those persons who didn't have 2 quarters to rub together. And I made a mental decision that, I don't want to just write about free enterprise. I want to participate. I want to learn about finance. I want to learn about money. And I kid you not, it was a couple months later that I went from the nonprofit world to the for-profit world. Doug Casey offered me a job. If he had offered me the job 3 months earlier, I would have said no. I was too busy saving the world. But that decision, just that attitude switch of, I want to get serious about money. I want to learn about money. I want money so I can live a freer, happier life. Completely changed my life. And hats off to the Casey guys. But it was the decision that came first. This sounds sort of, pop psychology, but this is a fact. This is what I experienced. So I want to tell everybody out there, liberty and finance is a fantastic concept. They absolutely go together. And the finance can increase your liberty in your life. And by the way, the liberty can increase your finance too. One of the great things about Doug Casey is that he's not a Republican or a Democrat. He's not an ideologue from one side or the other. So he doesn't have the blinders that most mainstream financial types of one stripe or the other have. He can look at things independently. And I think that's a tremendous advantage to anybody out there who's willing to think and act independently. Sorry, I went on too long on that, but I just think that's so important. And actually, I don't think I've ever really had a chance to say that on an interview like this. So congratulations to your dad for getting liberty and finance going, and congratulations to the audience for thinking in this way. And I think it's an advantage, not a disadvantage. Okay, sorry, silver. So yes, there's a lot of sort of disparaging memes about silver out there, the poor man's gold. And I'm not sure how impactful that is, but what is impactful is that there is this idea going around out there that silver has become just another industrial metal, right? It's been demonetized. And of course, the powers that be want to say that gold and silver, they're not money, that, those are barbarous relics. But the fact is that governments still hoard gold. And the Basel III Accord is even, we'll see if it actually happens this time. But the fact that it's even there says that governments still view gold as money as much as they dismiss it. Not so silver. And governments used to have hoards of silver in case they ever, had to walk back the silver coinage and put it back into circulation. They had huge hoards of silver, which they were dishoarding in the 90s, which is part of why silver really diverged from the gold-silver ratio that was over thousands of years, really began diverging when this massive dump from governments of getting rid of their silver stockpiles hit the market. So that may seem like ancient history to a young man like you, but that's the context coming into this millennium and the big rally up into the 2010s and where we're at now. I think it's important. And I think it's wrong, actually. This idea that silver is just another industrial metal now is wrong. And that's a good thing, because when there's an incorrect idea out there, sooner or later, reality asserts itself. Reality does matter. And when that idea corrects, the snap to, the coiled spring unleashed can be phenomenal. So I think this is perhaps the most fundamental argument in favor of silver right now. Now, so what I'm saying is, to summarize, is that silver is a monetary metal, has been a monetary metal along with gold for thousands of years. It still is. On a daily basis, you see them moving together, okay? They'll go up more one than the other or go down more one than the other, usually silver more than gold. And the ratio of their exchange rates has been wacky in the last years, but they move together. Every day almost, they move together. So it's just contrary to the data to say that silver is no longer like gold, that silver is no longer a monetary metal. The data says that's wrong. So that's the bottom line. But this incorrect idea persists. And when reality asserts itself, I think that's massively in favor of silver and silver stocks, which is, of course, my favorite way to speculate.
And I think that's such a good point that, it's not really seen as a monetary metal right now. If we look at, as you mentioned, how it's been a monetary metal for thousands and thousands of years, but really over only the last 50 years or so, it hasn't been. And it's like 50 years compared to thousands of years is nothing.
I wouldn't even go 50 years. I would say since the turn of the millennium is really when silver has been more demonized as just another industrial metal. But you know what? The word for money in many languages is silver. Argent. Plata, it's slang, okay, in Spanish, but in many languages, the word for money is silver. Because even though, gold was there always, silver is what you used on a day-to-day basis for trading. Gold was precious enough, rare enough, the value was concentrated enough that you held your gold and you used silver when you went to the market. So silver was the currency. And I would not be at all surprised to see that reassert itself in the future.
And how would that happen? I mean, we saw, it stayed around till, 1964 or whatever in U.S. coinage, 1969 and $50 a little bit. But anyway, so about 50 years. it has been demonetized.
But the government's held it then. Like they took the silver out of the coinage, but they're not really sure if they could get away with it, is my interpretation, right? So they kept the silver. And it wasn't until the 90s that, and not just the US, but really around the world, governments started dishoarding. Like, okay, we got away with it. It's been decades. We don't need the silver anymore. It's bulky. It tarnishes. We can just quietly hold gold, but let's get rid of this silver.
So how do you see silver reasserting itself as a monetary metal?
Well, I don't actually see it going back physically into circulation. I know and it's actually same for gold. Like coinage is neat, and maybe in some areas it could happen, but the world is going digital anyway. And I'm not saying that gold-backed cryptos are necessarily the wave of the future, but perhaps something like that. To carry the physical metals around is much less. I mean, it's the same like people don't even bother carrying paper dollars around anymore. And those are much lighter than gold coins. They don't clink in your purse and give you away in the dark of the night. So if carrying paper money is going away because that's inconvenient compared to electronic forms of transfer, then carrying bulky coins, that seems very unlikely to me, except in some kind of Mad Max scenario, right? The world collapses, the internet goes away, then sure, physical coinage would sure beat barter. But assuming the world doesn't come to an end, or the modern world doesn't come to an end, then I do think electronic transfers are absolutely how it's going to be. But I would see those as being backed by something real. I think, despite my good friends in the crypto community who think Bitcoin will be like the one ring of power that brings them all into Mordor and rules them all in the end. Well, number one, my answer is let the market determine. We don't have to figure this out in advance. Put your best ideas out there. The market will decide. My own feeling, though, is that something real backing whatever currencies are used will have the advantage, and that will mean gold and silver.
So kind of a bimetallic standard is what you're looking for then? Yeah,
I mean, arguably it could be platinum and anything else rare. Copper, we've had trimetallic standards before, right? The copper penny before it was turned into zinc, and now even the zinc is too expensive to put into pennies. But why would you need that? Like, why would it be more important to have a copper penny versus a silver penny? I don't see a market reason for there to be a proliferation of metals. And the more industrial ones, I think, will have a disadvantage compared to the more monetary ones. The ones that have a primary monetary cachet, I think, will be preferred. So like palladium, for example, why not make it palladium now? It's more pricey right now than gold. But its use is primarily in these catalytic converters. The world's going electric. I think if you set up a palladium-based currency right now, not too long down the road, you'd really regret it.
And that is an interesting point you make, how, primarily it would have a monetary component, whatever metal we'd use. I mean, silver does have a lot of uses in industry, though. It's a very industrial metal. So how do you see that in the future of, like, if it reasserts itself as a monetary metal, how will it play both worlds in a sense?
It always has. Like, we don't need to solve this problem. Silver has an investment demand. It has industrial demand. It has jewelry demand. Different sources of demand. That's not a problem. It's only a problem if you're a central planner and you need to figure out how much silver to allocate to the different needs. The market can take care of it just fine. But this brings us back to sort of your initial point. Why silver, and what's the buzz of silver? Why is that particularly important? And that is this thing that you're saying now, which is that it also has the industrial demand. And silver has long had many industrial applications, but that really seems to be blossoming. Is quite funny. I don't know if you were there or cognizant of it at the time, but at the same time that governments were dishoarding silver, there was this story, the narrative at the time, that silver was primarily used in photography as an industrial metal, and that was going away. And the end of photography was going to be the end of silver. It was going to $1. It was never recovering again. And that didn't happen, because it turned out that there's more silver in the cameras and printers and electronic gadgets than there was being used in the film. So So it was a really clever argument. It was forward thinking and smart to pay attention to the end of an era in film photography, but it completely got it wrong. And now you're seeing silver, because of its unique attributes as a metal, one of the 92 naturally occurring elements, that is the most conductive. It's more conductive than copper. It's more reflective. It has unique properties. And that makes it ideal for these photocells. And that's one of the big pluses right now that wasn't really there before, the mass proliferation of solar power around the world. And yes, it has government subsidies, and maybe it shouldn't happen the way it's happening. I get that, but it is happening. And all of that technology uses a lot of silver right now. And there are ideas, new patents out there and ideas to reduce the amount of silver. But as far as I know, so far, all of the panels that are in commercial application, from Tesla to the knockoffs in China, they all use a significant amount of silver. And roughly speaking, a single family home in the United States uses almost a kilo of silver on the roof to go completely solar. It's been a while since I've done that math. It might be slightly changed, but roughly speaking, it's a significant amount of silver. So again, we've got the metallic side, which I'm very bullish on for all the money printing reasons and so on that we're aware of. And then you've got the industrial side, which is just exploding. These solar cells, even the cars, the Tesla cars, not the Tesla solar roofs, use, I don't know how much silver, but it's a lot. And it's used in more and more things. Then there's also medical uses. Silver has antimicrobial properties. And then, of course, the jewelry hasn't gone away either. It's still there. So, there's, I think of it as sort of the win-win-win metal. You've got the industrial side and you've got the monetary side. That makes it the win-win for this year. As we come out of the COVID shutdowns, you have the rebound. Now, whether that's sustainable or not, the square root economy, we'll see. But the rebound, I think, is real. And it's going to boost demand for industrial metals across the board, including silver. And the money printing is going to boost demand for monetary metals, including silver. But then there's also absolutely the story du jour is the electrification, the EVs, Tesla. And, you see just, jaw-dropping statistics in Norway, something like 80% of the cars sold last year were electric or something. It's a small country, but it's a really interesting straw in the wind. I think Volkswagen just came out. I saw a headline this morning about their electric vehicle sales doubling. That's significant. That's a major automaker. So this is in a way just another industrial application, but it's like an uber industrial application. It's not just the regular industrial growth in silver. It's this potentially exponential tailwind that could take silver much higher. And that's why I've called silver the win-win-win metal of 2021.
So many amazing points there. And kind of taking all that in, a lot of people have said there's so many bullish fundamentals for silver. There's the monetary aspect, there's the industrial aspect, and we're seeing a lot of physical demand. For example, at Miles Franklin, a lot of people purchasing physical silver, and people are saying, wait a second, why isn't the price rising? And there are a lot of theories out there saying that, the government's trying to suppress the price of gold and silver to make the dollar look strong. Banks are, making profit by manipulating precious metal markets and all that. And we also see at thinly traded times in the precious metal markets, a lot of metal is dumped on the market. And it's like, what is going on? People are looking at this and saying, it seems like precious metal prices may be suppressed. Now, you have recently wrote an article about this, and you said that, yes, precious metal markets have been manipulated, with a caveat that you don't, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is kind of, and if you can kind of explain your view on this a bit more, that yes, there are individual moments of manipulation, but the idea of a grand conspiracy with all these different actors, the banks, the government, and everything, that seems a bit far-fetched. But I'd love if you could just kind of give your perspective on the precious metal manipulation, especially with respect to silver.
Sure. Well, there's several key points. To go to the last one first, it is not my contention that there is no suppression. It is my contention that suppression is not proven. And it drives me nuts when you try to have an intelligent conversation about the recent price action in gold or silver, and you see that, the known variables, powerful correlates like real interest rates, and you see them move and you see the metals respond. And this is useful information. It helps guide our decisions. And you talk about this and you get a bunch of responses, particularly on YouTube for some reason. Oh, it's all manipulation, manipulation, manipulation. And it drives me nuts because the manipulation isn't a helpful answer. Like, even if that's true, what the one that really pushes my hot button is that it totally manipulated. The market is totally controlled by the governments. Well, if you believe that, if they could push a button and set the price of silver at 10, 15, 5, 20, whatever, if you believe in total manipulation, the correct logical thing to do is to pick up your marbles and go home. Because there's no sense investing in this space, certainly no sense in speculating on any of the stocks, which is what I do, in such a totally controlled market. You can be destroyed overnight, not just lose a little. You can suffer a major loss of capital if they push that button the wrong way the next morning. So if you believe that, then don't even look at my writing. Don't even watch my YouTubes or whatever, because I'm a speculator looking to speculate on this market. Just take your marbles and go home. Sorry if that's rude, but I just think that explanation or that knee-jerk, oh, it's all manipulation, manipulation, it's too much, it's too far. And even if it was true, it would mean stay out of the market. So if you're going to be in this market, if you're going to invest, if you're going to speculate, then you need to look at the variables that are visibly driving metals prices and not just dismiss them all as manipulation. That's absolutely the most important point. Does that make sense? Right? I'm not saying there's no manipulation. I'm just saying, come on, get a sense of proportion. So that's number one. The other thing is, I don't believe it's true that it's totally manipulated. If it was, gold would never have hit 2,000 last year. It would not have risen to 1,900 after the crash of 2008. The gold and silver were screaming alarms about government policy then, and they're doing it now. So if the government had control of this, we would not see the prices that we have. Now, a lot of people say, oh, but it should be higher. Fine, it should be higher. But the fact that the prices have been able to move as much as they have shows that whatever manipulators are out there, they do not have total control of this marketplace. And the other thing on this, in terms of the vast conspiracy, I'm a libertarian. I'm an anarchist. I am perfectly comfortable being very suspicious of governments and seeing them as being, bad actors. I have no problem believing that at all. But you still want to go with the evidence. You want to understand what, makes sense to you or what you'd like to believe, or, that's one thing. What is proven, what is shown, that's another thing. I don't mean to be insulting. I don't mean to put down anybody's ideas or beliefs. But as far as I can tell, the facts do not support this vast conspiracy theory as a proven fact. And if you do believe that, it puts you out of the market. Sorry, one last thing on this. For there to be when I talk about, people say that the price of silver drops at the open, and people are like, oh, manipulation, manipulation. And I'll point out, well, look, gold dropped at the same time, and actually so did the industrial metals. It was a bad day for commodities. And look, interest rates went up at the same time. So there are variables in the marketplace that explain this other than just, some nefarious manipulator. And the answer I get to that is often, oh, well, the manipulators manipulated all that too. It's a big it's a big conspiracy. Well, that's the part to what you said is hard to believe. I have no problem conceptually thinking of governments wanting to suppress the price of gold and silver. Of course, that shows that the emperor has no clothes. I get that. But to do that and manipulate all these markets, they would have to have corrupt officials at any number of agencies and within the exchanges. They would have to have foreign agents, a lot of them with a lot of money, to mess around with the Forex markets. They would have to have not just the exchanges, but they'd have to have bond traders in this. It would be a huge conspiracy, not just in scope, but a number of people. And people are really crappy at keeping secrets. The idea of such a vast conspiracy involving thousands and thousands of people in multiple countries, many of which don't have any love to lose for the United States, the idea of nobody blowing the whistle for decades on such a vast conspiracy, that's really hard for me to believe, even though, the libertarian in me wants to believe it. As a person who tries to go based on the evidence, it's really hard for me to accept that. Sorry, last thing, that doesn't mean that I don't see the manipulation you're talking about, right? The tons of metals dumped at the thinly, I see that. But that can also be explained by, bankers or other third parties trying to do this for profit. The vast government conspiracies for suppression is not the only explanation for what does look like blatant manipulation in the market. So the bottom line, yes, I see manipulation, but I'm not going to let it keep me out of the market, because I made a lot of money in this market, and I think I will make a lot more going forward.
And there are a few things that you really highlighted in the article. It's a long list of things that people point to saying this is evidence then of this grand conspiracy, right? And you kind of go through them step by step. I just maybe want to pick three, if you could kind of detail them for our viewers. So first off, spoofing, right? JP Morgan was fined almost $1 billion for spoofing markets, including gold and silver markets.
Well, let's take them one at a time so I don't forget. So the spoofing, I've seen it. I've seen the conviction. My point with the spoofing is the spoofing shows, and by the way, if you're the sort of person who's suspicious of everything the government says, well, the government has said that JP Morgan spoofed, but you're suspicious of what the government says. So maybe JP Morgan is innocent. It's the victim of a government conspiracy. I'm not saying that. But so the fine that JP Morgan agreed to pay shows that JP Morgan spoofed. It does not show that governments are suppressing the price of gold and silver. Now, maybe they're in cahoots. Maybe is a very dangerous word. All I'm saying is that the spoofing shows spoofing. It doesn't show anything else. And it's not helpful when we're trying to have an intelligent conversation about gold and silver prices, and we're looking at the variables that have explanatory power, and they're in action today. As you and I are speaking right now, gold just broke over 1,800, silver hit 2,750. And the usual variables that we see correlating with these price movements are in action today. And if I write about that, somebody on Twitter is going to post a link to JP Morgan spoofing and say, oh, it's all spoofing. It's like, that's not helpful. Sorry.
No, that's perfect. And I think one of the things about spoofing as well is it's not necessarily suppression. Spoofing doesn't indicate that they moved the market up or down. It just indicates that they moved the market.
Right. It's not directional. It can happen either way. Right. And it's not unique to metals. People want to feel picked on the metals markets. But you know what? They were fixing LIBOR too. The number of cheats and liars out there, it's very large. The financial world is a mean place. I think it's a little myopic to imagine that they're meaner to us.
And the other points that you mentioned, just a couple of them in the article, is people referencing pooled accounts as evidence for manipulation. So what is your perspective on that? Like accounts that are unallocated, and people saying, well, maybe they don't have the physical silver or the physical gold that they say they do.
Yeah, I think that's, I have never advocated that anybody buy metals in an unallocated account. I'm not even comfortable with a custodial account, fully segregated, audited, and if I want bullion, I want to hold it in my hand. Okay, at some point, I hope to be wealthy enough that I can't hold it all in my hand, or have it nearby. That I'll need to have a vault. If I get to that point, I'm going to get a vault, though. I want to have control. The whole idea of physical, realized, congealed wealth that you can touch is that it's the financial long for which there is no short. So if you hold that in, an ETF or an unallocated account, you're adding counterparty risk to what's supposed to get rid of counterparty risk. So I don't like the whole idea to begin with. But if you go that way, if you have more money than you can stuff under the mattress in silver comfortably, it gets very lumpy, you understand that you're out in counterparty risk, and you should understand what an unallocated account is. Of course, if you call the owners of an unallocated account and say, hey, I want my silver, they're not going to be able to cough it up right away. You don't have a bar sitting there with your name on it. You have notional ownership of a piece of a large bar that a lot of other people have notional ownership of. And they're going to need enough of those other people wanting to redeem at the same time to melt that bar down into some form that they can send you your share of it. And it's going to cost money. It's going to take time, even under the best of circumstances. So it just seems a little silly to me to see a time of peak demand. People are calling Miles Franklin and everybody else and emptying the shelves. And at that time, when everybody's buying and wanting to take possession of physical, you call your unallocated account custodian and say, I want my silver. Of course, it's going to take time to deliver. That's not evidence of any kind of conspiracy or malfeasance or fraud. I do not believe that there is fraud at the Perth Mint or Kitco or any of these others. They're not all part of the great government conspiracy. If Kitco was part of the great government conspiracy, I don't think Canada Revenue would have audited them and smacked them around the way they did, right? I don't see evidence for that. And certainly not the fact that it takes some time to get your silver out of an unallocated pool account. That's not evidence of anything at all, except for the crush in the market right now.
Last point I'd like to touch on is there's more paper silver out there than the physical metal, but you say that that's not evidence of fraud.
Not at all. My metaphor for this is, imagine you play a poker game, right? Everybody puts money in the pot. This is the futures market. The players show up and they put money in the pot. And you get chips for that. These futures contracts are like the chips. You get chips for that. And you play a lot of hands, and the pot stays there until the end of the game. At the end of the night, whoever wins, takes the pot. If at the end of the night you went to take the pot and there was no money there, that would be fraud. Right? They lied. It wasn't there. Somebody snuck away with it. But over the course of the night, those chips are going to be flying back and forth. If you add up all those transactions, let's say there's $100 in the pot. You play for 5 hours, 2 bottles of rum, lots of cigars. By the end of the night, you've probably traded thousands and thousands of dollars worth of those chips. That's not fraud. That's not inflation. It's just the chips going back and forth. These contracts fly back and forth, electronically, how many times a day? So the fact that the transactions, or even the way we phrase the question, this paper silver is so much more, it's because it's the paper. It's not the real thing. It could be 1,000,000 to 1. It wouldn't matter as long as the contract is based on the good for delivery bars that are still there. Now, if people go to actually take those bars off the COMEX and they're not there, that would be as evidence of fraud. We haven't seen that yet. And sorry, one last point on this. I think a lot of people don't understand that when it says stand for delivery, that doesn't mean they're taking the silver or gold off the COMEX. That means they're taking delivery of the contract. What's traded is not the bars. What's traded is a contract. And when you stand for delivery, you stand for delivery of the contract, which does give you the right to take the silver or gold off the COMEX. But nobody does that, or almost nobody does that. So when people talk about record numbers of people standing for delivery, it doesn't mean record numbers of people emptying the COMEX out. Now, some people evidently are, but so far there's been no evidence that the bars aren't there. When that happens, when somebody goes and they redeem, they have their warehouse receipt that underlies a futures contract, and they go to the COMEX and they say, I want my gold, I want my silver. The COMEX says, oh, we don't have it. Then that's a problem. Now, if they say, well, this warehouse is empty, we're going to have to transfer it from London, that's not fraud. They have various good for delivery warehouses around the world, and a delay is not fraud. Absence of the metal would be fraud. I haven't seen it yet.
Now, with respect to investing in silver, does any of the manipulation that's been proven, or essentially the manipulation that exists and we can see, does that really impact investing in silver? Should that actually be a concern to investors at all?
The overall answer is no. It's there. I'm not denying it. But as you pointed out, the spoofing could be positive or negative. Right? So somebody could, in the thin hours of night, buy a bunch of silver or gold. And that's pretty rare. I get that it seems to go the other way more often than that. But there are times where you wake up in the morning and, whoa, what happened in Hong Kong last night? The prices of metals did go up. And oddly enough, nobody screams manipulation when that happens. So I think the answer to this really, though, without getting lost in the weeds, is to go back to what I said earlier. To whatever degree there is manipulation out there, which I grant that there is, whoever they are, and if they have an agenda, and even if some of them are coordinating based on that agenda, and it is hostile to the interests of gold and silver bugs, they have never been able to control it. If silver and gold should be higher than they are now, it doesn't take away from the fact that they are higher now than they have been for years. They're still near multi-year highs. And the better companies are making a ton of money right now. So if you get all hung up on this manipulation thing, and you stay out of the market because it's all manipulated, you've lost out on the opportunity to make, big money. The alternative is not just Dogecoin, right? You can make money in this space unless you let your fear of manipulation scare you out of it.
All right. Well, Lobo Tiggre, we really appreciate your time today. If people are interested in hearing more of these interviews and keeping up to date with all the interviews we're doing, go to libertyandfinance.com. In the left-hand corner, you can put your name and email to get notified of all the new interviews we're doing. A free newsletter, so it's perfectly free. And Lobo, if people are interested in learning more about your work, where can they find you?
Yeah, thanks for that. It's very simple, independentspeculator.com. If you're interested in no hype, hopefully rational analysis of the markets, please do drop by. We have a free weekly product as well. And I promise, if you sign up for the free weekly letter, it's called the Speculator's Digest, we will not spam the heck out of you. We don't send you a flood of daily advertisements. It's a weekly digest. You get one email per week. If you like the way I look at things, if my analysis makes sense to you, that's an easy way to be kept abreast of what I'm doing.
Fantastic. Lobo, once again, thank you so much for your time, and God bless.
Thank you.
This is Dunnigan Kaiser, founder of Liberty and Finance. I'm now a licensed gold and silver broker for Miles Franklin. Call me directly for the physical gold and silver that you need at the best price with personalized private service from one of the oldest and best companies in the business. 31 years strong, A+ rated by the Better Business Bureau, 0 complaints, licensed and bonded for physical delivery, vault storage, or precious metals IRAs. Excellent prices, privacy, and confidentiality. Pay by check, money order, ACH, bank wire, or Bitcoin. Satisfaction guaranteed. Call me directly at 419-819-9209 or my sons and fellow brokers at 310-562-6400 or 419-490-5295 or email us, Kaiser@milesfranklin.com.